What's going on, folks? This is Cole on Noir, and this is another episode of Seeing Live, and I'm fresh off the plane from Atlanta from the NRA annual conventions. And joining me today is a congressman from Georgia, a Democratic congressman from Georgia, who also has a triple A rating from the NRA. He goes by the name of Vernon Jones. How's it going?
Doing fine. Let me clarify one thing. I'm in the Georgia House of Representatives. I'm a state representative.
Okay. Absolutely. Sorry about that.
Don't listen. Don't demote me, okay? Don't demote
me. Fair enough. So this is not our first time interacting. Actually, I met you actually at the annual conventions. Was it that Sunday or was it that Saturday? I believe it was a Saturday.
That
Saturday, absolutely.
Yep, that Saturday.
Yeah. So before we kind of jump into that, let's just talk about initially how you got into politics from the beginning.
Wow. Actually, probably started in high school and college, but my parents were always very active. They were not political folks, but they understood the importance of education. They understood the importance of being able to vote and things of that nature. If you understand their generation, obviously, they didn't always have their right to vote because of what was going on at the time. But they wanted to make sure that I understood that my vote counts and I should be involved, and my generation had more opportunities and I should take advantage of it. And so I actually pursued public office right after college. I was about 28 when I first ran for the Georgia House of Representatives. And pretty much, and you know this, if you're too smart to get involved, you're being governed by those who are dumber. And so I wanted to, get involved in the process. And one of the ways you can do it, you don't always have to be obviously in elected office, but when you're in elected office, you can have much more of an impact. And so I'm honored to serve. I've served over 16 years. I served 8 years in the Georgia House of Representatives. Also served 8 years as county executive. I had to run a government. And then after sitting out for 8 years, I returned back just recently, 2016, back to the Georgia legislature.
Okay. What made you make the decision to come back?
Just seeing how my state was going, how my country was going, and knowing that I understood government, how to make it work, how to build relationships across the aisle, seeing all the divisiveness, seeing the gridlock. And I thought that coming back, I could have an impact on my local community, the legislative district that I represent, but also the state of Georgia. And, to a great degree, a lot of times national problems are resolved through local solutions.
Yeah.
And so I had to call in to come back. How long I'll be back, I don't know. When I feel like I'm not making a difference anymore, I guess I'll pack up and head back home. But it's an honor to serve. Public service is a higher call.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. And it does sadden me when I see where we get into the gridlock. Even our current president, whether you voted for him or not, but don't you want him to succeed? Don't you want him to be successful? Because if his presidency is successful, our country is successful.
Yeah. You bring up a very valid point, and you spoke on the kind of divisive nature that we're in right now. One of the things I found out about you that was rather interesting is I don't know if you still consider yourself this, but you're a self-described conservative Democrat.
Well, let me tell you, born and reared in the South, obviously I'm fiscally conservative. My faith is strong, coming from the community where I came from. I mean, religion is a big part of it. I'm Baptist. And who stays in church longer than people of color? I mean, you're in church all day long,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember as I got older, I would stop wanting to go to church with my mom because I was like, I'll stay too long.
When I used to hear about the Christian Coalition, the perception of the Christian Coalition were white people. Well, let me tell you, who's more of a coalition than black religious people? I mean, that's nothing new. But my faith, again, is definitely strong. And I am conservative when it comes to many things. But my culture, the reason why I believe in the Second Amendment, first of all, you cannot believe in the Constitution and do not believe in the Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
It just makes sense. And secondly, I was fortunate enough, my father and my mother taught me the importance of a gun at a very early age, what it's used for, why it's used, when it's used, purpose, etc. And as a farm boy and growing up having an appreciation of wildlife and protecting and conserving green space and open space, I learned at a very early age how guns related to the sport, how guns even related to protecting your personal beings and or family and your personal items, your property. And it was interesting. By the time I turned 15 or 13, all of our brothers, I have four of the brothers, but by the time we turned 13, after being with my dad, hunting, learning about a gun, spending time with him, that was the biggest gift we got when we turned 13. It was like
Yeah.
the second most important thing was getting my driver's license. The first thing was getting my,
Yeah.
Remington 16 barrel or 16 gauge shotgun. And so embraced it, love it, appreciate it, value it, and understand it too.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I always say I don't like. I always felt like the whole issue about firearms should not be a political issue. I think it's something that transcends political ideologies in a lot of ways. But we are where we are right now, where if you are considered a Democrat, then you're inherently, I guess, supposed to be anti-gun, and then if you're a Republican, you're supposed to be pro-gun. From your perspective, just considering your background in the political sphere, why do you think we've gotten to this point where automatically the idea of firearm ownership is completely divided by our political ideologies?
Well, here's an interesting dichotomy. In the southern states, almost
Hmm.
all the legislatures now are Republican legislatures.
Hmm.
Where at one time it was dominated by white Democrat legislatures. The white Democrat, they never left the southern states. They didn't move to Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto. They went over and became members of the Republican Party. And they're still embracing, a lot of them are still embracing, the
Yeah.
Second Amendment. Unfortunately, in the southern states, the Democrats have become majority. Almost every state, the Democratic Party is mostly black. Most of the elected officials,
Yeah.
both state and Senate chambers, are predominantly black, which is very unfortunate because in those states, it's almost like it's two-party state, one black, one white.
Yeah.
But it was those, I think the narrative was shaped by the liberals, and certainly the liberals in the media, that the NRA is a bad thing. I was looking at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported in today's paper, where they single out one or two African Americans who participated in the NRA. And the genesis of the article is that black people don't like the NRA,
Yeah.
and they only had two members coming. But if you take that same exact paper and you look at the 17 members that it used, or I should say reporters, to cover the General Assembly while I was there this year, they had 17, all 17 were white. Now, they didn't say that, they want to talk about diversity,
Yeah.
but here's the same newspaper not practicing what it wants the NRA to have. Oh, the NRA doesn't include African Americans. Well, neither does the Atlanta Constitution. And so it's kind of interesting when you look at those dynamics. However, I like to think that those of us who are independent thinkers
Yeah.
know that this is really this is a trap. This is to put us in a category where we can't think for ourselves. Liberals are supposed to know what's best for us. They got you angry about the NRA, but the NRA doesn't have issues against people of color. It's almost like Muhammad Ali when they wanted him to go and fight in Vietnam. He said, they didn't do anything to me. Why do you want me to go and fight the Viet Cong? You're my enemy. You're the one who's doing things to me.
Mm.
And so it's almost where they're building this mistrust between the African American community and the NRA. But if African Americans stop and think for a second, none of them want you to take their guns away from them. Many of them want guns, but it seems like there are those who shape the narrative where they don't want African Americans to be involved in NRA. They don't want African Americans to be involved in the Republican Party. It's like they want to keep them in a particular group where they can be taken advantage of, actually. And so I got to tell you, in all fairness, I am unique in many regards, and I do sometimes unnecessarily get viewed differently, but I think they have the problem, not me.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for them to come on and join you and me and be on the right side.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I got into firearms in about in the purest way you could possibly imagine. When I got into firearms, there were no politics involved. There wasn't this idea of the gun debate for me. I shot a gun for the first time, fell in love with it, and then my passion grew. It wasn't until I started to grow within that sphere, then I was confronted with the political component, and then I'm in the position I'm in now. But, from your experience, you being pro-gun, politically, have you seen any issues as a result of is this an issue that you would normally have to deal with your constituency or potential constituency when it comes times during voting seasons and election season and so forth and so on?
It's interesting that you said that because there was 5 of us in the election, in the primary, and the general. So I was in a runoff with another opponent, and NRA endorsed me. Well, in her mind, she's African American too. She went and plastered that, hey, the NRA just endorsed him. However, let me back up. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, though, they made an issue. In other words, can you believe this? The nerve of him getting endorsement from the NRA. All right, guys, all right, go get him now. Go get him. That was to set the stage as if I had done something bad. But what's interesting, when whites are endorsed by the NRA, even if white Democrats are endorsed by the NRA, the liberal news media do not go after him and make them or serve them up to have their heads taken off. And so when I would go to debates, and when she would make that an issue, I said, let me tell you something. I am a member of the NRA. I do support the Second Amendment. I do support bearing arms.
Yeah.
How many of you in it right now don't want to protect your family or your personal item? How many of you right now own guns and you see hands start going up in the air? So immediately I refuse it, and we go on to the next issue because see, what's keeping them down is not about me being a member of the NRA or not about me believing in the Second Amendment. What's keeping them down are those false narratives that keep them in that box and not deal with the issues that are really having a profound impact on them,
Absolutely.
And so, but I gotta go back to your point. Why should they even be? Why should it be political? It's in our Constitution. How many other items in our Constitution are we debating and making such a divisive issue about? You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, they don't do the same thing with the First Amendment. I mean, the First Amendment, it's just a given. It's understood.
I guess unless you're over at UC Berkeley,
well, then there's that,
They welcome you to come in with the First Amendment. Now, it's like they want to select who can come on and express themselves. Why are they afraid of somebody having a different view of theirs? Well, isn't that what we're based upon? Freedom of speech. So.
Well, I think it's because largely you're coming from a place of intellectual honesty and consistency. I think on the far extreme liberal side of things, I do honestly think that they believe that they own the black vote. I do think they feel like they own the political ideologies of African Americans, and so. And people have made this analogy before. They call it the political plantation, so to speak. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, there's this kind of like outrage from the standpoint of, well, you're supposed to believe this because you look like this. And then when you don't follow that train of thought and that mindset because you tend to be a more independent thinker. And I'm going to clarify something for the people who are listening. What I'm not saying is just because you may be more of a liberal than you are a conservative doesn't mean that you can't think for yourself or that you're not an independent thinker. What I'm saying is what we have an extreme version of liberalism now that it exists, where when you do start to think independently, and then that independent thought leads you to something that's actually not in line with what they believe in, they become outraged, almost they essentially become political fascists.
Well, it's interesting too that you're saying that because many liberals, white liberals, actually believe they know what's best for black people.
Yeah.
They want to organize you. They want to lead you. They want you to believe what they want you to believe in. Matter of fact, they'll tell you how much they support you, embrace you. We'll build you a habitat house too. Not in our neighborhood, but we'll build you a habitat house.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of almost like a nurturing, if you will. And I'm not calling anybody racist.
Yeah, absolutely.
The white liberals tend to want blacks to depend on them and not to be independent thinkers. And I think that's horrible. And even to the point where they would literally get blacks to attack blacks for thinking independently.
Yeah.
We're the only, believe it or not, in my opinion, we're the only group, if you will, that if we embrace or support a person that may be a Republican, not only are you attacked, but then you're called, well, you must be a Republican.
Yeah.
No other race, whether it's Asian or Hispanic or Native American or Indian, when they vote independently, if they vote Republican, nobody uh, cracks the whip on them for being independent and voting for a different party. But when it comes to people of color, specifically African Americans, if we feel that way that we like a particular Republican,
Yeah.
or we may support someone, we may not be Republican, we
Yeah.
could be Democrat. But let's say for Donald Trump, many blacks were afraid to say that they were for Donald Trump because they didn't want to be told, "Oh, you must be a Republican."
Republican. Yeah.
It's like many whites were afraid to say they support Donald Trump because they didn't want to be called a racist.
They did the same.
And,
Go ahead. Sorry.
and so that's an interesting dichotomy there, and privately and silently they went to the polls and voted for him because Trump got more. But I think even in the very beginning, Trump, I saw, and I called it early on, a lot of my friends would tell you that Trump was going to win because he was saying what people really felt.
Yeah.
But he had a lot more support in the African American community until the white liberal media shaped the narrative that he was a racist.
Yeah.
And blacks who've been victimized by racism, I'm not saying that's not true, it is true.
Yeah.
Many have. So I think many times when they hear that word, they cringe so much because, what has happened in the past, and cases currently too, but they tend to run away from Trump then. That calls them, okay, he's racist. But Hillary Clinton was the one who called people of color, men, super predators, sexual super predator or super predators.
Yeah.
It was her husband with the crime bill with these outrageous sentencing for that affected mostly men of color. But nobody seemed to say anything to them. And, I look at Margaret Sanger, who was a founder of Planned Parenthood. Hillary Clinton won the Margaret Sanger Award in 2015 and talked about how much she admired Margaret Sanger. But Margaret Sanger, when they found her, it was based on black genocide, that black people literally defected, and she went out to have all these abortions to abort these black babies. And so, until you really know and understand, I guess you just still hung up with that closed mentality that this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Absolutely. I think.
I can be a Democrat and still be independent.
Yeah.
For whites, they call them Reagan Democrats, and nobody beat up on them. It's okay for them to vote Republican.
Yeah.
But if black voters do that, then they're treated differently, and there's this alarm. Okay, whip them back, back to where they belong now. So and it's okay to talk about it,
No, absolutely. I think one of the most brilliant things done by the other side, and when I say the other side, I mean the extreme versions of a liberal mentality that blatantly has an agenda, is fusing the idea of values and race. And you touched on this. They did the same thing with the gun. If you are adamant pro-gun, if you're adamantly pro-gun, and you're a firearm advocate like myself, and when I first came out, I got a lot of blowback. Even to this day, Russell Simmons was like, "How could you, as a young black man, advocate for firearms?" And I'm like, why would I not advocate for my ability to protect myself? Like the fact that you can
advocate for the Second Amendment.
Exactly. Like if you eliminate all the political ideologies, you eliminate everything, right? Take race, take everything off the table, and just look at each person as an individual human being. At the end of the day, people want to be in the best position that they possibly can to defend themselves. And right now, in the space and time that we live in, that best thing is a firearm, because we all understand that you don't necessarily live in the best environment where police officers can get to your house at a moment's notice if something does happen. A police officer can't always be there with you if you do have to walk home late at night and you find yourself encountered by somebody who wants to do you some level of harm. And so when you look at it on a fundamental basic level, this idea of now including race into it, where you must be some type of Sambo or Uncle Tom or Republican, the nefarious inferred aspect of the idea of a Republican, because I advocate for firearms, or like you said, or I believe in fiscal responsibility, or things of that nature. It doesn't baffle me because I understand how powerful it is, the implications of it. There's a sensitivity that the community has with respect to our racial past in this country, and they exploit it at every chance they get. And like you pointed out, they're going to fuse if they see certain individuals going a certain way from an ideological standpoint, then they start fusing the idea, well, if you're thinking like that, that person's a racist. How could you be over there with that when he is a racist? And then with the way, the overload of information that we have today, it's hard to really parse out fact from fiction. And so, and I think that's kind of what leaves us in the state that we're in right now.
You know, I tell you too, we're talking about really the right to bear arms. We're talking about the NRA. We're talking about the Second Amendment. But you mentioned something that's important. Race has seeped into that conversation. And that's sad because race should not have anything to do with this.
Absolutely.
But I'll go back to what I said. I think that liberal media shapes the narrative. Anything that may lead them to not think traditionally by being dependent on what they feed us. Because if you start associating with the NRA is more associated, or at least perception-wise, with Republicans. So here, if blacks start associating with the NRA,
we lose a stranglehold on their votes.
They're going to embrace the Second Amendment today. Tomorrow they're going to be Republicans. You know, we white Democrats, we need that black vote to get elected. And if not, you know what's going to happen to us. So let's, take them back to the other side. And so it is unfortunate. And I'm not beating up on the Clintons. I'm not beating up on Planned Parenthood. I think they do a lot of good things for women. But if you start to really look at and do some research and have some knowledge, many would tell you that people of color do not like I Wish I Were in Dixie. I think it's a beautiful song, but they love Amazing Grace. But you know what? Historically, what many would tell you that a person of color wrote I Wish I Were in Dixie, and a slave owner wrote Amazing Grace. And so if you just out there and you all call it, I don't like I Wish I Were in Dixie, well, how can he be talking about land and cotton? Well, how can Ray Charles be talking about those Southern Pines back in Georgia?
Yeah.
He loved his native state, even when his native state didn't love him, but that was where he was born, and that's the dust that he came from. He embraced, the beautiful Georgia environment. I grew up on a farm. Let me tell you, there's nothing like growing cotton and seeing it come to fruition with that cotton bow. I've had to pick cotton, but it's a part of your culture. It's a part of loving the environment, loving how you can grow things. But people can get so caught up, and they can play fear overshadows rationale.
Yep.
And that's what is used. Fear is used to keep people of color from wanting to be involved in the NRA. But even if you don't want to be involved in the NRA, embracing the Second Amendment is what it's really about at the end of the day.
Yep.
Embracing the Second Amendment. And when you look at the NRA's founders, they were Union officers. Well, the Union fought in the Civil War, and the Union helped free the slaves in southern states. And so, again, what are you thinking? And I'm sad to hear what you said Russell Simmons said, because some do. Why do we even have to attack? Why can't we just disagree?
Yeah.
When do you see whites attack whites on issues based on you white, you're not supposed to be a part of that issue. I mean, of that organization, or you white, you're not supposed to be this or that. You don't hear that. And so it's unfortunate, because when you support, and I've voted both ways. Let me tell you, I vote for the most part. But it's unfortunate how we get caught out there. But I'm glad you and me and West and J.C. Watson's a good friend of mine, that we can have these discussions. And I always said the best generation to really try to capture who's still soaking things in are the young folks in high school and college.
Yep.
If the NRA were supporting, let's say, North Carolina A&T with its agricultural and technical curriculum, the NRA could be supportive of some of those agricultural programs and scholarships for young people. But hey, here's what the NRA is about. But NRA doesn't practice going out and legally obtaining a gun and shooting the place up. No. Hey, we're responsible gun owners. Matter of fact, in most part, when you buy a gun, you register, you give your information, people know who you are. You're not trying to hide your handgun. You're not trying to hide owning a gun. Most folks who try to hide owning a gun are those who have it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
And how many times you see the NRA members or people who purchase their gun through a legal method? It doesn't happen, but how often do you see them being the ones who are committing the crimes and shooting people? You know,
I mean, it's a noted fact that
Yeah.
the number of crimes committed by people who have concealed carry licenses is it's not even nominal. It's so minimal. It's almost zero. And so from that perspective, you pointed out the fact that the things that the NRA espouses are all legal, responsible means of attaining, owning, and handling firearms. And so there's the fact that that you have a group of people who are trying to vilify that aspect of it, but then the same group of people say we're not against the Second Amendment, but it's like, well, then you're against the very organization that's trying to practice and preach the very fundamentally responsible aspects of firearm ownership. So I'm only left to believe you are against the Second Amendment, because if you had your way, you'd get rid of that organization, which would inevitably lead to the destruction of the Second Amendment in many ways. So,
my father was a World War II veteran. My oldest brother, Vietnam vet. I had 3 other brothers serve in the military. My dad, when he got to the military, he won a number of awards because he already knew how to use a gun. He could hit a target. And when he came out of the military, my dad had even more love for a gun because he got a chance to be exposed to more in terms of military weaponry. But my family, my mother owned guns. Now my mother's 89 years old right now. And if you have a conversation with her about her not being able to have a gun, she's going to have a problem with you. And she's 89. And I remember going home and visit my mom before we took her away from the farm because of health failing. I would go and visit her sometimes, and she'll say, look, I'm hearing those chickens out there making some noise. Go fire it up out there. Let's see what's going on out there. Whether it's going to either be a fox, a 4-legged fox, or a 2-legged fox. If you were in that hen house, you're going to hear, and she'd fire that gun up. So, and we kept it, it's kind of interesting. We kept our firearms behind the door in the house. Everybody knew you do not touch those guns unless for certain reasons.
Yeah.
And we were responsible gun owners. And so I see these young people now who want guns, and it's okay. I think we can do more education and teaching them why they should have a gun and what do you do with a gun, and you don't use it. You don't, just like anything else, you don't abuse a fast car.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
When a teenager gets his car, this car can help you, this car can hurt you. But you have to be a responsible driver. You have to be a responsible gun owner. There's no difference in many regards, because a car can kill you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
But this debate is needed, and again, I'm glad and proud to see you there in the NRA, what they're doing. Keeping the debate live, keeping active. I do want to see more people of color come in to dispel the myth, but I think there's an intentional effort by some to keep them from wanting to be a part of
that. Absolutely. Yep. Well, thank you very much. I truly enjoyed this conversation. Feel free to come back on the show anytime you want. And it was good. It was definitely good getting the time to meet up with you at the annual meetings, and hopefully you'll join us when it's here in Dallas next year.
Yeah, I'm coming out there. Listen, let me tell you, I want to say to your viewers right now, I'm Vernon Jones, and I am the NRA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Vernon Jones. Absolutely. You have a good day.
Okay.
All right. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk with Marshall Tinger of Trigger Happy Panda.